Hello and welcome to this third video of our section 1 of the first volume of Unreal Scripting with C++. And in this video I am going to show you how you can log certain information on the Unreal Editor output log. If you remember from the first video, first couple of videos, we basically downloaded Unreal 4 and we also made sure that we have Visual Studio. Then we created a third-person template for code in Unreal Editor, and then we had two different projects basically. The Unreal Editor opens up your third-person template, so basically this is what we had in our Unreal Editor, and then we also had the Visual Studio code for the game. And what I did towards the end of the last video, I asked you to open the Unreal character, the header file, and the C++ source file. And that is what we are going to add our code to so that we can log how many times the player has jumped. Before we get to that, let's first open up the editor and then play the game. And then so if you click on the play button, you will see that the game is played, and then you can move your character with the W, A, S, and D keys backwards, forward, left, and right. And if you press the space bar, you would notice that your character jumps. This is what we are going to use. This jump functionality of our character is what we are going to use in order to perform the log of how many times the character has jumped. And so the log will show up at the bottom in the output log. And again, if you haven't had it activated, you can go to the window menu, and then from there go to the developers tools, and then make sure that the output log gets checked, and then it's going to be showing up on your editor. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to program the jump functionality of our character and perform the log. Alright, now let's start our programming. So we're going to go to Visual Studio, and then we're going to open up the character.h header file. Our character is basically a class that is inherited from the Unreal Engine's character class. And when we created the third-person template, the engine automatically creates this class for us and also populates the basic code within the class. And the Unreal Engine's character has a lot of functionalities associated with it, and one of those functionalities is called a jump. So what I'm going to do is right-click on the character class and then go to the definition of this. And so you notice that the character.h opens up, and it's basically from the engine. And so it's basically also a class that is also inherited from the pawn. And if you scroll down through the definition of its properties and functions, you would notice that one of these functions is called jump. So let's find this function. And so the function that we have and we are going to be overriding is obviously called jump. And it is a virtual function which allows us to be able to override it in the objects and the classes that are inheriting from this base class. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to override this function. So to do that, we are going to go back to the Unreal character.h, and then what I'm going to do is on top of my functions within my class, just simply type in virtual void jump. Effectively, what I'm doing is I'm overriding my function, my jump function from the base class. And so here, just say the jump functionality that I'm going to be implementing. In fact, if you remember, once we played the game earlier on, when we pressed spacebar, the character jumped. Now that I'm going to override this function, my character will not jump because it's not going to call the parent's jump function, it's going to call my jump function. Now, in order to implement it, I'm going to go to the C++, and it is a void, a Unreal Scripting basic character, namespace jump, and this overrides my function. Okay, save your program and then build your changes, compile and build your changes. In order to do that, you can either use the shortcut in Visual Studio 2015 of Control Shift and B, or simply click on Build and then click on Build Solution, and that builds your solution. It'll take a little while for the Visual Studio to compile and build your project, and once that happens, we can go back to Unreal Editor and then play the game and see what changes we have made here. All right, now that our code is compiled, we open up the Unreal Editor, and now if you play the in the game, you would notice that the WASD move functionalities are there, but when you press the spacebar, the character doesn't jump. And the reason for that is we just overrode the jump functionality of the parent character, which makes the character jump, and doing so removed all the functionality. To get the functionality back, press Escape to get out of the game play here, and then we are going to go back to the implementation of our version of the jump, and then we would call the parent's function, and the keyword for that is just to simply type in super and then jump, and this gives me the parent functionality of my character back. So we're going to compile the code again, and once the code is compiled, we're going to go to the Unreal Editor and play the game, and then you see that you get the jump functionality back. All right, so our code is now compiled, and now we're going to go back to the editor and then play the game. And now that we are calling the parent's jump function, we have the jump functionality back. Okay, now stop the game, and let's go back to the Visual Studio, and we are going now to start coding our logging functionality here. Okay, now that we have our jump function overridden, and also calling the parent jump function that performs the animation for the jump for our character, let's start the logging process. In order to print something on the output log of Unreal Engine, we basically call up a macro in Unreal Engine that basically performs this log function. That macro is UE_log. And what's going to happen is that in this macro you pass effectively 4 parameters. The first parameter that you pass is called category name, so you could call up any number of log categories. In our case, we perform a log temp for the category name. Then the next parameter is the verbosity of your log, and you could basically make it to show as a warning or an error and stuff like that. So in this case, we are going to make it a warning. The next parameter is the format of what you want to log. I'm going to basically type in just a simple text that is printed out in the log output. And the text will basically say something like player is jumping. So in order to do this, I'm going to call up the macro text and then type in player is jumping. And if your text had arguments and parameters, you could basically pass those parameters inside of your text. And since I'm not using any parameters at this stage, I'm fine as just a simple text. So this writes the text player is jumping on the output log for me inside the Unreal Editor. So we're going to compile and build this project. Again, Control Shift and B, or go to the Build menu and then Build Solution. And it's going to take a little bit. And once the solution is built and compiled, we're going to jump into the editor and play the game and see what happens. Okay, my solution has been built, and so now we're going to play the game. And so if you press the spacebar, you will notice that the character jumps, and then at the bottom of the output log, you will see the text that is effectively a warning text showing up in yellow, says that the player is jumping. Okay, now that our logging works, let's go ahead and also show how many times the player has jumped in the output log. We are going to need to create a variable, and then in this variable we basically set it at 0 when the character is created, and then every time we jump we just increment this number and then we show it inside the log as a separate text. A couple of things we need to do before this can happen. First, we need to create a variable inside of our character header file to contain the number of jumps that are occurring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, under the public section of my character, I'm going to create an int variable, and I'm going to call this how many jumps. Okay. Then we are going to go to the source file for our character, and in the constructor of our character, we're going to initiate this variable that we just created to be at 0. So when the game starts, the character will have 0 jumps. So we're going to set how many jumps to 0 here. And then we go back to the jump function that we just created. And so every time we are making a jump, we're going to increment the variable how many jumps. And this, effectively, the first time you jump, it's going to change from 0 to 1, the next time from 1 to 2, the next time from 2 to 3, and so on and so forth. Next, we need to create a string variable to contain a text that says the player has jumped these many times, and also include this variable of how many jumps in the text itself. So the first item is to create an f-string variable or f-string object, and I'm going to call it jumps text. And then this jump text is going to be a string, so I'm going to call the printf functionality of the f-strings. And obviously, inside this f-string, I'm going to pass a text. So the text macro, and then the text will say the player has jumped %d, that takes an integer as its argument. And then the variable that I'm going to pass on the %d of this printf is going to be the how many jumps variable. So then again, the jump text is an f-string object, and it is basically contains the text saying that the player has jumped so many times. And then to generate this, I'm going to call up the printf functionality of the f-string. What it does, it takes an input, which is a tchar pointer, and also if the tchar pointer has arguments such as %d, %f for floating variables, or floating point arguments, and %s for string arguments and stuff like that, those will be passed in the list of arguments to this printf functionality. Now, printing this text is going to be very simple. Again, you call UE log macro, and then I'm going to make it a log temp warning, and then the content would be a text which will contain a string argument, and then the string argument is basically going to be my jump text, rather jumps text. Okay, I think I typed everything correctly, so we are going to compile. Okay, I have a compile error here, and that actually makes sense because the argument that I'm passing as a variable for a string should be the pointer to the f-string, not the f-string itself. So now we're going to recompile, and the recompilation worked, so we are going to go and now play the game. And so obviously we have the functionalities we need, and then we press spacebar to jump, and now you see both texts being logged out in the output log. The player is jumping, and then the player has jumped 1 time. So if I press twice, 3 times, however many times I jump, you see that the variable content is incremented, and then the value is being logged on the output log. Okay, so this shows how you can effectively set up your first project. We are going to use this project for the rest of this class when we add functionalities to it, and so it's a very essential lecture here. In this section, we performed 3 things. First, we installed the Unreal Engine 4 by going on the Unreal Engine's website and registering our account and downloading the UE4. We then set up a C++ code project in Unreal Engine 4 by utilizing the third-person code template. And finally, we wrote a program to override the jump functionality of our character in order to output the fact that the character has jumped whenever the character jumps when we press the spacebar, and also to maintain how many times the character has jumped in a variable, and then to show that on the output log of the UE4 editor. So with this, I'm going to wrap up this first section of our lecture series, and we are going to start the next section by discussing the classes in Unreal Engine, and then going over creating classes, making them editable, and then using actors and component classes, and implementing basic actor functionalities in the next section.